Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Binkhorsts and Blockbusters. I'm Gerrit,
And I'm Cait.
and today we're continuing our War on Christmas with the 2008 Best Picture winner, The Hurt Locker, starring.
Yeah, this is. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, starring Jeremy Renner, who's become a much bigger star since this movie.
Yeah, I was surprised to see him in this movie because I didn't remember, like, looking back on remembering this movie because I remember when it won Best Picture. I was watching the Oscars with Dad that year, and cheering against Avatar avidly. Um,
Yes,
yeah. So, but yeah, I didn't remember Jeremy Renner being like famous at all. And of course he became famous later on as a Marvel guy. So, and he was also in a bunch of other action movies,
yeah.
that we like. And I mean, like, I don't remember, I didn't do any research about Jeremy Renner before we started the podcast. Is he a dude we like, or is he, an asshole?
I think he is okay. Although
Okay.
I think there was a Jeremy Renner app that caused some controversy.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't want to know. I'm good. But he's not like a Mark Wahlberg situation or a who was the
I
guy that was racist that we
Me-
talked about 2 weeks ago?
Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson. Yeah.
Okay, well, I hope Mark Wahlberg doesn't listen to the podcast. But I'm sure there's something about him to be canceled.
Well, I could have sworn I heard something on TikTok that he was cancel fodder. I don't know.
Okay.
I might be thinking of somebody else.
Okay.
Who knows?
Garrett in post production, please do some fact checking now. Hello, everyone. This is Garrett in post production. So, a lot of things were just said. The first thing, the Jeremy Renner app. It was created in 2017 as a means for Jeremy Renner to communicate with his fans, but it was shut down in 2019 after being used as a platform for bullying. And as we know, nobody likes bullies. This application also had upwards of $400 worth of in app purchases, just like singular items. What the hell you're spending $400 on to pay Jeremy Renner for? I don't know. He ended up refunding the last 90 days of in app purchases once he decided to close the app. It was also used for him to like do live streams and vlogs. It was kind of like a lightning in the bottle idea from the people who made it. Also, there were some contests held on there that were allegedly rigged, and that's like a big problem. Okay, second thing, and I'm at least one drink deep at this point. This is a wild ride we're about to go on, so stick with Garrett in post production here. Marky Mark Wahlberg. So I'm gonna quote Wikipedia directly here. Mark Wahlberg has a history of racially motivated attacks starting from when he was a teenager, and this doesn't really let up. It's a very interesting read if you want to check it out. One notable incident while he was on PCP, he was arrested for an attempted murder. This was for attacking one person, but earlier in the day he attacked another person of Vietnamese descent in April of 1988. I was lowered to assault charges. He got into a lot of trouble. He's he is a piece of shit. I'll go ahead and say that one. But in 2015, he apologized to Pope Francis for some jokes he made in the Ted movie, so it's all okay, guys. He's also the co-owner of Wahlburgers, which is a burger joint that one of his brothers opened up. It's just stupid. He also owns 5 Mark Wahlberg Chevrolets in Ohio, and as an Ohioan, it's just the worst. Um, so to kind of get back to talking about the Hurt Locker, this relates directly to the film. He revealed later on that he was booked to fly on 9/11 on one of the planes that would have crashed into the Twin Towers. And he got into some controversy in 2012 when he said he would have been like a badass and stopped the hijacking. Okay, Mark, you'd probably be as scared as everybody else there or oblivious to what was going on in your first class seat. Okay, now we'll go on to Mel Gibson. I told you to buckle in. We're going to talk about him in depth next week when we talk about Braveheart. He has a similar he has, well, I wouldn't say they're kind of similar of racially and prejudice motivated harassments, but his are well less violent. Back to the Hurt Locker, please.
Anyway, this is a movie about a war that happened in our lifetimes with technology that is probably still happening today in modern warfare. Maybe not today, because things have changed pretty significantly. Um, but it has a female director, which we love to see.
Yes.
It's a war movie, which fits our War on Christmas theme, and we're excited to talk about it.
But first, what's on the television?
Yeah, so Gerrit recommended this documentary for us to watch, and I watched it and was completely horrified and depressed and frustrated and angry. So if you want to feel all those feelings, give this one a watch.
Yeah, I feel like this is like it was a very powerful documentary to see, but also one of those that just like made you go, there's no good answer here. Like it's such a complicated situation and all such a mess that it's just like other than just throwing money at the problem, like somebody's
Eh,
gonna mess it up.
Right, and the money has to be thrown at the right problem. So this is about these Christian missionaries who go over and build these medical clinics to help with malnutrition and, help children, starving children, blah, blah, blah.
A very
Um,
noble pursuit. A
yeah,
very like 100% that is a good thing to do is to make sure children do not starve.
right. And they're doing it in areas where there are famine and there are, weather and insect patterns that create, situations where kids in different times in their lives are just not going to have the nutrition that they need. There's logistical issues in getting supplies to remote villages and all those kinds of issues. There's supply and demand issues as far as just doctors and nurses go and antibiotics and all those kinds of things. But these people are all approaching it from a religious perspective that is that God will tell them how to do the right thing. And turns out going to a doctor school is the way you learn how to do the right thing here. And these people don't do that. But then there's also a whole other element of, Instagram social justice warriors who are trying to expose these organizations for the harm that they're committing. And they're actually creating a lot of harm also.
Yeah, and they're taking the money and donations and doing things that don't really seem to benefit anyone.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, they're using, donations to fund, smear campaigns on social media platforms rather than feeding the children. And I mean, if there's one thing about this documentary, no children get fed, you know. Like that's the problem. The
well,
children need to be fed and they don't get fed.
yes, they very quickly stop being fed because other stuff happens. It's it really left me scratching my head at the end of like who's in the right, who's in the wrong, what the hell's going on, what is there to do about this problem. and it doesn't really like give us an answer, which is pretty upsetting. Like they didn't have the fourth story in there of here's something that's actually doing some good in this country.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
and I think that that would have really helped the documentary of, if they showed some, maybe non-religious organizations that were actually doing, like food outreach and logistics, because that's what this comes down to. Food, people starving in the world comes down to logistics in
yes,
getting the food that exists to them in a manner that is timely before the food expires or explodes, because food explodes too. That's fun.
what?
Um, so yeah, I mean, that's yeah, this is an extremely frustrating documentary, and I definitely think you should watch it if you have any interest in exploring this area. And maybe like if you're somebody who donates to organizations that you see advertised on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or whatever, give this one a watch, and use it to better understand where your money is going, and to think about the organizations that you're donating money to more deeply. Um, I can recommend, there are some organizations out there that, are direct to people, organizations like Donating to Kiva, where you're essentially loaning people money in order to start businesses and, get that extra help to get their stuff off the ground. Um, there's other organizations where you can like buy farmers cows and stuff, and other animals in order to, help them with their farming. Um, yeah. So watch it. Hopefully you can come up with a better, more positive outlook about the world than we have right now, but you know, it's one of those documentaries.
I mean, a part of it definitely is there's an attempt to get justice, and that's important to us.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and I do think that that's one of the one positive things. Like I find, as somebody who works in the legal industry, I find litigation to be useful in a couple of ways, and very, very wasteful and useless in a lot of ways. And, it can be used to expose bad organizations and bad policies and bad, stuff, but it can also be used to ruin people's lives and develop smear campaigns and destroy people who are already victims and already hurt, and make them relive events that, are terrible. And they can also be used to make people tell lies. And we did see in this, I think that was the only good thing in this documentary, was I think that the lawyers involved with the case, you know, did the right thing by the victims that they represented.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
On a lighter note,
Yeah.
the funny hat show is still going. The Gilded
Gerrit,
Age.
so like you'd been describing it as the funny hat show, and I was like, haha, because I'm, a historical costume person. Love that shit. And then the first scene of the first episode was just everybody putting on their hat.
Yeah,
And I
everybody
was
putting
like,
on the hat for Easter Mass.
okay, Garrett's right. Funny hat show it is. I get it now. And I mean, these are some stellar hats. Like, I would wear 9 out of 10 of them. I don't like Mrs. Russell at all. I don't like the funny accent she has, and her hats are not in style.
In the second episode, Mr. Astor, he just goes, "There will be no tiaras at my party," because she wears like tiaras around, and it's just like, yeah, it's pretty cringe.
Yeah, I mean, tiaras in this age, like, I mean, it was part of the fashion, and, these are all American, money people. So, to back up everybody, this is a show about the Gilded Age in America. Caitlin's ideal uh time to live in America. Like, I love medieval stuff. 14th century is my thing. But if I had to live in the past and live in America, it would be 1890s Philadelphia, and I would just love it. There's so many cool things like artistically, and like railroads are happening. Um, but yeah, like so this is 1890s New York.
Yeah.
They're feuding families, old money, new money issues. They're building opera houses that will in the future have terrible acoustics. Um, yeah, it's a great show so far. I'm very excited by it. I mean, slight spoiler, there's a couple different love plots that I'm really enjoying, that I had forgotten about from the first season. Um, I can see where some of these plots are going, and like, yeah, it's some good stuff.
It's very, like there's a lot of interpersonal like drama and things going on, but like I don't know, to me it's very enjoyable. I like it. I like it quite a bit.
Yeah, I hope that they bring in more historical stuff. I want to get into the railroads more, because I am convinced that the railroad barons ruined America in the 1800s.
Oh
So,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like
Uh,
that's where all of America's problems started. It wasn't slavery. It wasn't, uh, women's right to vote. It was definitely the railroad barons
and I
that
mean
ruined America.
it continues to be a problem today. We
It does.
But yeah, this is a good show. We'll keep up talking about it as the weeks go on. Probably something interesting will happen in like two or three more episodes that would be worthy of talking about. That's usually how like these sort of shows go, is like the first couple episodes set up what the conflict will be for like the whole season, and then like a few episodes later, things come to a head. There's a climax.
Yeah, and I mean this is one that I kind of wish all the episodes were out, because it's one of those that I would probably just binge, but I'd probably also lose a lot of, details and stuff in it too. So,
Yeah,
pros and cons.
yeah, I like watching it each week because it's like here's a little, get to go into this world for an hour, much
That's
less
true.
than, yeah, going into it for a whole day.
Yeah. Well, I mean it is a very special world. It's very different from our current landscape. So,
Yeah, there isn't a single 5/1.
no 5/1s, thank the Lord.
Uh, Also on TV this week, I watched the first episode of the new season of Invincible, which is a superhero animated show on Amazon Prime. Um, Superhero content is something I've been at odds with for a couple years now. I think there's very little of it that's still good. I think Marvel's fallen off the deep end, so has most of mainline DC content. Really, anything that's like these big sprawling epics, I feel like are just degrading in quality at a rapid pace. Invincible is not a part of any of that and stands pretty well on its own as a comic book about uh, this dude that's invincible. It's, the first season's a coming of age story and like finding your place in the world and, grappling with the evils. And the second season has started out and it's all right. Um, it opens up with use of my one of my least favorite tropes in media now, which is the multiverse. I'm pretty fucking sick of that.
Yeah, that's obnoxious.
The thing is, I don't think it's going to be the big plot point in the show. I hope it isn't because I'm really tired of it.
Hmm.
I got into this conversation with some of my friends, and one of them, she asked me, is there a way that you could use the multiverse that I would enjoy? And I had to think about it for a really long time. And I really thank them for making me like question it. And I think its use in everything everywhere all at once and
Yeah.
in the Spider-Verse of being able to go in every conceivable like reality that you would exist in. These problems still exist. There is still love. There is still loss. There's falling out of love. There's There's struggling with your identity. There's protecting your loved ones. There's, the fight of good and evil. These are stories that only you can tell with this like device. These are stories you can
Hmm.
only tell with the multiverse.
Yeah.
I don't
I
think you can tell every story and then just add in the multiverse and make it interesting. I hate it when it's
yeah.
being used to raise the stakes. So we'll have to see where this goes.
Yeah, and I think, what's interesting to me is like immediately I think about Dune, which should surprise no one at this point.
No.
Is that, like when Paul looks into the future, he can see, a multitude of possibilities, and he has to, do things in order to stop any of those possibilities from happening, so that he can't see the future anymore. And I think that that's a much better use of, this multiverse situation.
Yes, I agree. And that is wholly different than what Marvel and DC are doing with it. Because in
Yeah,
Dune, it's very much like you're being able to see the fabric of reality that shows you everything that can happen from now. That's such an interesting concept. That's one of my favorite parts of the Dune series is this idea that like while your reality might be finite, where it goes is nearly infinite, and you know
right.
how to get there.
Yeah, and I mean it's about fate and change too. And I think that's a big difference also, is that the past does not have, there's not an infinite number of pasts. There's always just one. Um and there's an infinite number of futures, which is different from the multiverse, because in the
Yeah,
multiverse there's an infinite number of pasts as well.
and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and an infinite number of rules, which I think is something that Everything Everywhere All at Once does excellently, because there are realities where everybody's just a pet rock, and that's just how the world is, or
Right.
where you have hot dogs for hands. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I like is this like abstractness and being able to explore those realities, which doesn't happen because the creatives aren't creative enough to make that happen.
Right.
But also, I think, and this is something I've said to my friends, is that if you want to have a story set in a world where everybody has hot dogs for hands, that's the reality. You don't need to jump to that reality to have that story. Um,
Yeah. Well, and I think that the other television show that did it right is Rick and Morty. I think that and I have not watched Rick and Morty after like season 3, so excuse me if it's gone off the rails. And I think they might have like weird cancelable problems too.
so there is a new season that is out, and they have replaced Justin Roiland, who was the main voice of Rick and Morty, with some sound alikes, because he was canceled.
Okay. So I really liked the way that the idea was there's an infinite number of Ricks and there's an infinite number of Mortys, but you know, all of the Ricks and all of the Mortys have certain properties just because that's how the Rick and Morty dynamic is, except some are opposite, which is interesting too. So like I liked that, and I also liked that they were all conscious of themselves too.
Right.
Um so yeah, I mean there's pros and cons. And I like the way that they did that plot as well. And I think the other thing is that this works a lot better in a cartoon format than it does a live action.
Yes. You just have so much more room for creativity with animation than you do making CGI and like that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
I
The
know
other,
it's a similar process, but it's so much different.
yeah, and then the other example that I can think of off the top of my head is Hitchhiker's Guide. When they press the improbability button and then they go back to normalcy, there's that moment where everybody on the ship has been turned into a couch
Yeah.
or a yarn person. And I think that's the kind of like creative whimsy that these kinds of multiverse situations need to embrace.
Yes, I 100% agree.
Because I mean, what other situation can you create a world where your main characters are wingback chairs, or like pieces of pizza. And it produces a, incredible amount of creativity that we need to see more of in modern media because we're starting to get bored by the same old shit.
Yeah. So if you're writing something and gonna use this trope, make that art as creative as you can because people are getting really bored of just seeing it kind of tacked on as a way to expand the frontier of war.
So
So uh,
what else is on TV?
well, there's not a lot more on TV right now, but there's about to be because the Actors Guild strike has concluded. So we're gonna start
Yay!
getting our shit. We're gonna start getting Dune Part
Dune is
2.
coming! Yay!
We did it. We waited
Yeah.
long enough and people made decisions. We don't have a lot of details right now on the extent of their contracts, but they've been extended and modified over the uh, past over the next 3 years. Um, and next year, the animators guilds, their contracts go up. So hopefully we'll see them do another bargaining now that the another big portion of the industry has done it. This has
Well,
been a pretty great year for movie stuff, or these guilds in particular.
I hope that when the Animators Guild goes on strike, they hold out until we get more Rick and Morty, or not Rick and Morty, more Venture Brothers.
I thought
That's
the
what I demand.
I thought the Venture Brothers was over. I thought they did the movie and that was it.
They did the movie, and I still haven't watched it because I don't want it to be over. So I'm just demanding a whole other season
Okay.
instead.
Okay. So these are Caitlin's demands for the animator strike.
Absolutely.
Okay. I can get behind this.
Hmm.
So probably next week is when a lot of the information is going to come out because as of time of recording, it happened yesterday or the day before. So we'll probably talk about the contract and the good that it's doing for them. Um, I don't have much more to add on the strike. I'm glad it's over.
Yeah, yeah. We'll report back whether this was actually a fair labor decision or if our labor people got shafted. But we'll see.
The studios did say this was the last best and final offer. Whether or not that was true and whether or not they
Well,
agreed to it because of that, we don't know.
the last offer the offer that's accepted is always the last offer. So
Right.
that's just a soundbite to sound spooky ooky. That's just stupid.
Yeah, that's fair. It's always in the last place you look.
Yeah. And I mean, a good settlement is a settlement where everybody's unhappy. So, eh.
Okay. Well, now it's time to continue our war on Christmas. This time we're going to Iraq.
Boo.
Boo. So the Iraq War is a part of the U.S. invasion of Iraq starting in 2003, uh, from the War on Terror following the 9/11 attacks. Um, I don't think we should have done it, but that's my opinion.
You're going straight in. You're like, fuck this war.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. We retaliated really hardcore. I tried looking into, the effects over there and how many people or not we've, but how many people died in this conflict and what was going on, and it's nearly uncountable. This was a really terrible thing and events that happened, and just have rippling effects across, the last 20 years of uh, geopolitical gubbins.
Yeah, thinking about I mean, it's just such a vague like shit show of, and I mean, we'll talk about why, and I think this movie, shows why it was such a shit show. Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, so like, how much do you? So I was in high school or middle school and high school during all of this. How much of the actual stuff on the news do you remember?
I don't remember much. Um, and it certainly wasn't anything I was taught in school, because if we start teaching what's like happened in the past 20 years, the students are going to realize that their country is in shambles.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
And I say that with full confidence that no one can tell me I'm wrong with that that assessment. Um, Obviously I knew what 9/11 was, not necessarily immediately because I was like 4.
Yeah, but you
Um,
were watching the TV when it happened. It's yeah,
yeah, I was watching SpongeBob and mom was putting up wallpaper in the kitchen. Uh,
yeah,
this is the 9/11 story.
it
Uh,
is. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't have anything good to say about Iraq, and like too, like I was thinking about this when we were talking earlier. Um I know so many people my age who, went and came back and are not okay.
right,
Um,
right.
yeah, and I think that that's like I had a good friend in when I that I met in Indiana when I was in grad school who was going to school and had gotten his disability and stuff, who then committed suicide. Just because it was just, it was a lot. And then I have a friend who lost a leg, and who has been dealing with like the mental health of not only just being there but also losing the leg, which is just crazy. And yeah, I mean, I also know people that like, they won't talk about it. Like if it'll take years for you to find out that they were there. And yeah, it's not a happy-go-lucky war story. Not that most war stories are.
No. And this is something we touched on a little bit in the last review of Saving Private Ryan, about like these heroic war stories and how we're not going to get those anymore because there are no heroes here. There's so little like to be celebrated and that is good that's going on in these conflicts. And especially in movies. So this was one of the first movies about the Iraq War. So this was the first time it really got shown on screen like this. I mean, we saw it every night on the nightly news, but this was different.
Yeah, I agree. It put it in a different perspective. And I mean, I didn't watch this movie until this is the first time I've watched it, when I watched it this week. I never watched it back in 2008. I really had no interest in it either. I remember Dad watched it, and he told me about it. Because there was also a one of the HBO series that was happening in that time period was a Modern Warfare one, and I think we were watching that, and I mentioned like, oh, Hurt Locker, but then he ended up watching it without me for some reason. Um,
Well, he didn't
yeah.
want a repeat of Saving Private Ryan, despite the fact that you had aged a decade in between there. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. Which I mean, honestly, like there are a couple scenes in this movie that I thought were worse than Saving Private Ryan, you know? Like,
uh,
okay, just the one. Just the one. And I was just like, ugh.
uh,
I
maybe.
mean, the Nazis weren't doing that.
Well, um, yes and no. In many ways, they were doing other terrible things, but we didn't
They
see
were
those in
doing a lot of
Saving
other
Private
terrible
Ryan.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
But that,
so
yeah.
we'll get into a little bit of the facts behind this movie before we start talking about more of the scenes. So this was directed by Catherine Bigelow, and she is the first woman to win the Academy Award for Best Director. She won it for this movie, and this movie also won Best Picture. This beat out Avatar and she beat her ex-husband James Cameron for directing Avatar, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Get cucked, James Cameron. Say, I want to talk a little bit about the 82nd Academy Awards for this 2009, because this is just a weird year for movies. I never realized what was like up this year.
Yeah.
So I'll start out by saying I don't think this is necessarily the best picture that came out this year. Also on roll for the best picture was Avatar, which is trash.
Yep.
The Blind Side,
Ugh.
not good, especially with what we know now. Uh,
Right. Yeah. Ooh, yeah, you're right. Ooh.
yeah,
Did not age well.
no. District 9,
Good. Good movie. I will never watch again.
yeah,
Good movie though.
yes. A film called An Education, which I don't know what it is at all. Um,
I vaguely have heard of it, but I don't know enough to say anything about it.
yes. What I think probably should have won compared to these other films, Inglorious Bastards.
Yeah, Inglorious Bastards, better movie, better war movie, better plot, better resolution, better, Hitler died more times in Inglorious Bastards than
Yes.
any of the other movies.
Now,
So thumbs up to that.
that's a very heroic movie,
It
but it's
is.
fiction, so
It is,
it's a
yeah.
little different. Also, that year was Precious, uh,
Yeah.
a Serious Man, which is a Coen Brothers movie. I haven't seen
Ooh,
that one.
yeah.
Um,
You haven't seen that one?
no, I have not.
Ooh, don't watch that right now. You're not in the right time of your life to watch that. You might never be. Just
Oh,
don't watch it, Gerrit.
okay,
It's
it's one
fine.
of those. Also the animated film Up,
Up was better than most of these movies.
and Up in the Air, starring George Clooney.
Oh my God, amazing movie. Yeah.
Like
What a bizarre selection.
it really was. Like I love going back and looking at the best pictures and just being like, what the hell was going on? Like it's such a weird collection of movies. This one especially. But yeah, so The Hurt Locker that year won the best picture, the best director, the best original screenplay. Um, it also won the best sound editing, the best sound mixing, and the best film editing. It was nominated for a couple other things too. But this just had a sweep. Um, Especially compared to how many things Avatar was nominated for. It was, up against most of these in the same categories. Like really impressive how much this movie won. Um,
Yeah.
it won over
Well, and
tons of reviewers and critics. They put it at the number one for the year. It's at the top of a lot of lists.
wow. And it's hard. I mean, it's bizarre to me because like as far as like special effects go and like acting and pacing and screenplay writing, like I would give this movie like a B plus at the top at the best. Like in that's a very generous B plus.
Yes, I thought it was okay. I don't understand all the praise.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just because I was a bit distracted. Maybe that's because I'm soured on the subject matter. But like, I don't know. I didn't think it was nothing groundbreaking, but maybe that's from our modern lens.
It certainly could be. But so one of the things that I mentioned to multiple people when they asked what movie we were reviewing this week and I was like talking about watching it. I said, I liked it a lot better once I decided to think about it as a horror movie. So because there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of like in very much like Alien, like there's a lot of like tension and but the difference is the villain is like a bomb. It's a bomb that you have to defuse. And thinking about it that way made it, a little bit more fun for me to watch. But, I think that maybe that's part of it, is that the people who are making these decisions, and because, horror movies don't get on those lists. So
Yeah.
maybe they were just like, "Oh, it's so suspenseful." And it does, show American life. And I mean, if there's anything more American than, going to war, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I do think part of the reason why it won so many awards and got so much attention is because of the subject matter. Um, I think it was only a couple years before this, there were some, victories or, types of things in this frontier. This was something people were seeing on the news every night, being able to see it on the big screen and maybe identify more with what was going on was a, big draw to why it got all this. Another explanation could be it's a part of the massive propaganda machine that gets us to be in these conflicts.
Yeah. But at the same time, and we'll talk about this near the end, I don't think that the message at the end of this movie is all that positive,
No.
as opposed to Saving Private Ryan. The ending of Saving Private Ryan is so positive and so hero driven and like woo woo rah rah war. This is like, ugh, war is war.
Yeah, I feel like this definitely had a lot of mixed messages towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a couple more things before we go on. This film was shot entirely in Jordan, sometimes as close as 3 miles to the Iraq border. They did this because there wasn't really anywhere else they could go that had like a similar authentic look to it. Um, and that meant shooting in 100-degree deserts all day. It was a rough production. uh, they also employed hundreds of Iraqi refugees to act as extras to populate the scenes. And this whole story was based off a collection of experiences by a freelance journalist, Mark Boyle, who went along with a bomb squad similar to the one depicted in this movie in 2004 for a couple weeks. And they went on to write, I think, an article in Playboy magazine, and then they turned that into this screenplay that they uh, produced with Bigelow. And it would kind of go on to generate some controversy here and there, which we'll get into later. Um, it's an interesting idea, and that's what I'll give it. It's an interesting look at a small group of people in this conflict doing an insanely dangerous thing.
Yeah, I mean, so the background is these guys are the guys that go and defuse the bombs. When they find a bomb, they call this team. Um, and it's incredibly dangerous, and also a job that has a lot of variety to it, because these bombs are homemade. They're, or at least, made in, small rebel groups, insurgent groups, whatever. Um, yeah, so there's a lot of diversity in the bomb manufacturing, which we
Ye-
see in the movie, and I actually liked, as like, why, as we're going through the war on Christmas, we're trying to uncover the deep psychological reasoning behind Caitlin's interest in war movies. And I think that one of them is like technology. And in
Yeah,
this movie, we did get a lot of variety when it came to bomb manufacturing and, like placement. And like there's one scene where there's like 5 or 6 bombs that are like tied together in this like radiating star pattern that are like buried under gravel in the middle of an intersection. And I'm like, man, that's some interesting stuff there. Like somebody thought about this, and there's a lot of ingenuity in for these, the insurgent groups to make these very complicated bombs. And then, the quote unquote good guys that have to go in and defuse them, which, I guess is a good guy thing, in
yeah,
the grand scheme of things. Like these guys are defusing these bombs so the bombs can't blow up, civilians and Americans and, whoever the fuck.
Yeah, it's framed in most of our scenes where we're diffusing bombs of like this is it's always bad. Uh, this is a problem that needs to be solved, which I think really helps frame our characters' actions in the conflict as a net positive, a net good.
Hmm.
So the team that we're following along is comprised of, at the time, relatively unknown actors. Jeremy Renner's probably the biggest name at the time because he was in a Jeffrey Dahmer movie that captivated a lot of people, and now he plays a different kind of sociopath. Um, Also in the film is Anthony Mackie. He plays Sergeant J.T. Sanborn. He would go on to be in the Marvel films, as would Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye and uh, the Falcon, respectively. There's also a third guy in their company, played Eldritch, who's played by Brian uh, Gardy, and he's basically at the beginning he's just instilled with this PTSD after watching their team captain explode during a bomb defusal. Jeremy Renner comes in and replaces that character.
Yeah, and um, Jeremy Renner's character is totally different from the rest of the team in his, I don't know, his personality. Like everybody else is very like, okay, we're gonna go do our job, we're gonna do everything by the book, we're gonna do the procedure, like blah 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 blah. And Jeremy Renner, in a very, way that is done in movies and probably shouldn't be done in real life, goes in with swagger and like, does things he's not supposed to because it is easier to get the job done that way.
Yeah, he in many scenes acts as a lone wolf, like an army of one. And this was a criticism towards some veterans who had went and seen the movie. Um, One and this quote goes to a lot of the things that happen to this small group of people. And this is from Brandon Friedman, an Afghanistan vet. In real life, EOD techs don't conduct dangerous missions as autonomous three-man teams without communications gear. Another thing you'll rarely hear in combat is an EOD E7 suggesting to two or three guys that they'll leave the scene of an explosion in an Iraqi city by saying, come on, let's split up. We can cover more ground that way. There are a number of scenes in this movie that I think don't portray reality in the best way, but do so to get more spectacle.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the other thing is that like if they were doing this and behaving in this way, like and certainly I'm sure people did,
Mm-hmm.
or still do or like whatever. But, if they're getting caught, they're getting disciplined for this. And, it's not something that I'm sure is, allowed to happen in without impunity. Um, so there's that. On the other hand, they also need people who are crazy enough to do this job. But you also want to do the job right, and do it with as little risk involved. And I think that if there's one thing that modern warfare has accomplished, it is to find ways to do jobs with minimal risk.
Yeah, do things as safe as possible. Um,
Yeah.
So alongside of that same kind of idea of like these people aren't acting in necessarily the most logical or militaristically correct way. There was a lawsuit filed against this film by Master Sergeant Jeffrey S. Sarver, who sued production for his likeness of Jeremy Renner's character. Um, this was somebody that the journalist had followed and gotten some stories from, but they'd also got stories from hundreds of other members of the conflict and veterans about, the war and what was going on and about this job particularly. And Jeremy Renner's character was like an amalgamation of so many stories that he'd seen. we see this like idea come up time and time again in war movies that are especially a little bit fictional, of just taking different real life characters and accounts and putting them into the film as like, a composite character, because it's real, but it's like hyper real as to who this person would be. um
Right.
in
Yeah,
two
it's a fictionalized hero. And I think this is something that happens in history a lot, where, we have these fictionalized accounts of knights and, all these other, soldiers that, they are amalgamations of the acts of different people put together in order to create a more heroic figure.
Absolutely. um and this lawsuit occurred just before the Academy Awards. And then in 2011, the court threw it out. They were like, "Nah, this isn't what's happening." Um, so that's most of our team. We have a rough overview of these guys work together, sort of. Their synergy is not great, and that's one of the things that creates a big rift in between them, especially
Yeah.
during the thrills.
Yeah. So the big rift is mainly that, Jeremy Renner's character is in charge, and he, therefore is the one that's taking the most risk, which is interesting because it's kind of the opposite of Saving Private Ryan. The captain and sergeant are in charge and they're delegating, the task of going and being the sniper in the church tower to the specialist sniper guy who is then taking all the risk of being up there. Um, and I think that that's an interesting way to create a unit, is that, and like, on one hand, I agree with this. You should never tell somebody to go do something that you won't do yourself.
Right,
And I think that's a good way to do it. On the other hand, leading from the front is how you kill off all of your nobles in a crusade. So, maybe not the best way to do it.
right.
um Pros and cons here. So the sergeant, oh god, now I'm not remembering any of their names. A Sanborn is very much the rule follower who does everything by the book, whereas Jeremy Renner, who's actually in charge, is just gonna go and do the stuff.
Yeah, and it's it really like creates this rift between the group just immediately, and that
Hmm.
it places them to kind of call out Jeremy Renner after their first mission to defuse a bomb in the streets, of being just like, we don't feel safe with this guy. And there's some camaraderie, and they kind of like build up trust through a couple other missions that they go on, but then it's lost again at the end. And I think this is something that we might have touched on with Saving Private Ryan, but like, everyone in that group trusted each other and like put their lives in each other's hands. And in this, you don't see that at all, and that helps create a lot of anxiety. Um, because it's unpredictable. You don't know if these guys are gonna, make it out together, because they don't have that draw towards each other. They don't have that trust.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge thing. And if they don't trust each other and they become very, and this is why, it felt like a horror movie, because, there's a ticking clock, there's a monster, that's the bomb. There's three people who, see boogeyman around. Well, there's two people that see boogeymen all around them, and
Hmm.
one person that is just like, F it, I'm gonna just deal with this monster. And they've also had very negative experiences. The first scene in the movie is the original leader of this group getting killed by a bomb that somebody activates with a cell phone. So, like, like, there's reason to see boogeymen around the curb. And there's reasons to do things by the book, and there's reasons not, because had they just blown up the bomb without using they use like a little mechanical cart in that first scene, if they had forgotten the cart and just thrown the C4 onto the bomb and run away in a much quicker way, they would have dealt with it and maybe not died. But who knows? Like there are so many issues with what they were doing, in my opinion, like not clearing the area of civilians, not like the areas are never secured. They
There's
are.
always tons of onlookers, and in one where I think they're outside of a UN building,
Mhm.
there's the car bomb, and they're like paranoid about everybody that's looking in on them from like blocks around. And it's like, if this is really so dangerous, there should be people clearing the streets of all these people. But who's listening? Who's conducting this operation? In that scene in particular, it seemed like our team was the only one there. There was nobody else, which I think is where the criticism comes. Like, there would be so much more going on than what we're witnessing.
Right. Yeah. And I think that that's one of the things that creates a lot of tension in the movie. And makes you nervous as the viewer because you're like, oh my gosh, like I hope he can figure this out in time and I hope that these other people aren't, doing the wrong thing. And you really find yourself in the position of the two other guys who are incredibly anxious and nervous about what's going on. They're trying to communicate, they're yelling. And, Jeremy Renner's like, I'm just gonna keep trying to find this bomb in this stupid car, you know?
Yeah, and that's I think that's one of the like pivotal scenes in the film is
Yeah, I
it
liked that one.
yes. The next couple I did not like as much. Um, so there's a scene where they're like just kind of setting off bombs in the desert as like, this is how we get rid of bombs. We just blow them up in the desert, which, all right, pretty cool. We got some nice explosions from it. And there's a scene where the two other guys, not with Jeremy Renner, are talking about like, this bomb could go off while he's going to retrieve his gloves. It happens all the time. And it's not so much a hypothetical of like, oh, what happens if he dies? It's like, what happens if we pull the trigger? Because they're still not
Yeah.
in the same, like, they're not in the same side. They don't like working with them. And that's a horrifying prospect, that somebody on your own team might kill you.
Right. At the same time, what I was thinking about was that, Jeremy Renner's character is doing such, unsafe things that he's putting everybody in danger. So, and that like that's one of the things that happened with the car bomb scene is that they felt like they were, in a lot of danger. And I think they were.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, he
and
takes
so
off the 100-pound jacket and is just like, if this thing goes off, I'm going sky
yeah,
high
it doesn't
anyway.
matter. Yeah,
Yeah, it doesn't
yeah.
matter. I'm going to be comfortable and maneuverable on diffusing this bomb. Um, it's bleak.
It is bleak. But to go back to that point though, I understood that moment because, one of the things that I think about in medieval history a lot is that there were a lot of leaders in medieval history that for various reasons that might have been included inbreeding, they weren't very good people mentally. Like they had a
Right,
lot of issues.
right,
And when those people are leading you, what do you do? Maybe you accidentally shoot him,
right.
you know?
Yeah,
And you get rid of your bad leaders that way. And, so like if you feel like you're that unsafe, like that's a thing that you could do to remedy the situation. So, but I mean, it's horrifying that, they're thinking about that and that you would think about like killing, your brother in arms. Um, And I think that the movie does a really good job, though, of juxtaposing that scene with the next scene and the teammate camaraderie that happens in that scene.
when they meet Ray Fiennes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so on their way from blowing up bombs in the middle of the desert, they stumble upon Ray Fiennes, who's, I have no better word other than a bounty hunter.
Yeah.
He's collected some people for I think he says 500,000 pounds, which is a crap load of money.
It
Um,
truly is. And
and
they flashed the I don't know if you remember this, but so there was a like a deck of cards that had the pictures of the most wanted Al Qaeda people on it, and they flashed those cards, and I remember that because it was something they talked about on the news.
huh, I don't remember this.
Yeah, like it was a big deal, and I thought it was terrible then, and I think it's terrible now that, oh, there was a deck of playing cards where there were pictures of people that they wanted you to kill.
I mean, it's no different than the bounties in the Wild West, but I guess
Yes.
my mind is so detached from that because that was 130 years ago. You know,
Right.
uh,
Yeah. And, those were like badly drawn sketches too.
yeah, but now it's like here's mug shots or spy photos or composite sketches of who these people are. Play your cards with them so they're ingrained in your memory.
Yeah. Yes.
But in that conflict that they have, they get ambushed by a group of insurgents and they get fired upon by like snipers and other peoples. Their team dynamics change quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy Renner and Anthony Mackie are like spotting and sniping from a gun after Ray finds his shot. And they have like a goal. They have teamwork there because that's not something you can do alone.
Right.
Um, and our PTSD stricken Eldritch is down in kind of like the trench that they're fighting out of, and is really struggling to like get them more ammo and get things cleaned up because everything's covered in blood and muck. And Jeremy Renner is the first. This is like in my mind, this is when he almost becomes that like father figure of like he
Yes.
he goes down there and he's like, okay, here's what you got to do, and he tells him all you got to do is breathe, just spit on this ammo, clean it of blood, use your water pack, it was the most like teamwork that he had established at that point because everyone's life was in danger at that point. And
Right. Yeah.
I feel like he just worked a lot better in that moment than he did when he was just putting his own life in danger.
Yeah, there were two other things that he did during that scene that, really, really struck me. And like, I was like, okay. The one was, he yells at Eldritch to get him, one of the juices. So they have like a Capri Sun. And, so Eldritch, like, he's shaking and he like gives it to him. And, he's shaking too. And he gets that straw open. And because, Capri Sun, we've all done it. It's not the easiest thing in the world.
No,
Fine. He does it. And I'm thinking, he's just being a selfish bastard, like he's been doing through the whole thing. But instead of drinking any of it himself, he like very carefully hands it to Anthony Mackie's character and like puts it right under him so he doesn't have to move from his sniping position and he can drink the juice because they've been sitting there for so long that they're getting the low blood sugar and they're going to like the adrenaline's going to start to wear off,
yeah,
and he knows that and he's thinking about that and he's thinking about his team, and I just really liked that moment. And then the other thing that happened is Eldritch is looking at this. There's a bunch of sheep, and he sees a insurgent guy with a gun, and he's like, "Hey guys, I think I see a thing." And Jeremy Renner's like, "Do what you think is right," and it's that kind of encouragement because, like, okay, if he had shot some goats, like nobody would have cared,
all right,
but he needed that, that boss figure to be like, "Do it, do what you think is right. You take the shot, you take the call. It's up to you. Put your life in your own hands," kind of but also encouragement also. It
right.
wasn't like a blind like, "Oh, do whatever you want." No, it's like, you have the intelligence and experience to be able to make the right decision in this moment.
Yes, I trust you to protect my life.
Hmm. Yeah, which was so important
Yeah,
for the team at that moment. And then so after that scene is when they go like drink at base, right?
Yeah, yeah, after that. And they like, fight each other with this masculine energy and like, actually kind of like I think hurt each other. Um
Yeah.
that scene kind of lost me, but I was like, yeah, this is definitely what happens. Like this is the type of camaraderie that I think we're more used to in like, these sort of war
Yeah.
movies. Um
Yeah, it was very Apocalypse Now-y.
yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, like, I like lost interest in that scene very quickly because I knew what they were about and I knew what they were doing. And
right.
the most interesting part of that, though, was we did see Jeremy Renner's character, who's been diffusing bombs throughout the show or the movie, and you can see he's interested in the mechanics of the bombs as he's diffusing them, and then you find out he's actually been taking souvenirs from the bombs because he's interested in, finding patterns and kind of doing a little investigativeness into like how these bombs are actually being made and what's actually going on, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I thought that was weird, but you know, I guess it's no different from them, always sleeping like next to or with their guns, like that kind of thing.
Oh, so it was weird that that was under his bed?
I thought that was weird that was under his bed. I was just like that's a strange like character thing.
I
Um
think that the location had more to do with like, okay, so say his superior officer came in and like looked around the room and was like, oh, okay, you're not harboring, ferrets. Cool. Like you also don't want to have like bomb implements on your shelf. You want
right,
to hide
right,
it under the bed. I
right.
I think that was more what that was about. I
Okay.
don't think it was like I'm sleeping next to my bomb implements. I think it was like just keep it out from under, keep it out of eye shot of the doorway, really.
Right, right. It's not good that he has it, but it's good it's not on display.
Right. Well, then, and I actually, I liked the idea that this guy was interested in the mechanics of it. And because that's one of the things, again, that's one of the things I found interesting in this thing. I will not, FBI, if you can hear me, I am not making bombs. I will not make any bombs, but I found it very interesting, the, stuff in this movie.
Yeah, I am glad that they didn't go out of their way to really explain everything, like how they
Yeah.
worked. I feel like that would have been a detriment to not just the pacing and what was going on in the movie, but the reception it would have.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we wouldn't want this one to be to fall into the hands of the insurgents to make weapons against the stuff that we know. In preparation for the movie, Jeremy Renner did go through like a week-long training course and learned about like bomb defusal and stuff. And the suit that he's wearing is a real one. So there was like a level of authenticity here that like could be a bit too real, but maybe or maybe not. I don't know enough about it to say one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, and I think that if there is a lack of authenticity in those things, that's okay
Yeah, that's
because
fine.
it's like I don't want to know how to make an atomic bomb. I don't really want anyone else to be able to know how to do this. Like
Right, right.
it's bad enough we all know how to make mustard gas. There's pros and cons to a lot of like details, especially in a modern war movie. Like if we're watching a Civil War movie, there is almost nothing that you can learn watching a Civil War movie that would help you in any kind of modern warfare situation.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true.
There's some things, but not a lot.
Right.
Though, I mean, I think, the right to bear arms means muskets, and I do think firing a Gatling gun at some point in my life is on my to-do list. But, I
It's
can't imagine I would do that in any kind of war capacity.
no, no, that's a touristy thing.
Yeah.
Like a couple weeks ago when you said you'd go to Italy and shoot a cannon.
Yeah, I'm looking into it.
Nice. So there are a couple more scenes in this movie that are like kind of like twists and pivots. And one that kind of sends Jeremy Renner on his own warpath is finding a body bomb, which is this incredibly disturbing thing that I didn't realize they did of loading a corpse with explosives, which is just a terrifying and evil thing to do. Um,
Yeah, I was fully on board with this movie, and like, I wouldn't say fully on board. I was liking the movie enough to keep going, and framing it in my mind as a horror movie with tension and suspense, like, okay. And then this scene happens, and I was just like, God damn it. I have just like my faith in humanity is just like crushed by this.
this is where I
Um
think the movie goes a bit off the rails.
Well, then it gets dark. And in a way, this is a very, Heart of Darkness kind of path
Hmm.
where, and if you don't know, Heart of Darkness is the book that inspired Apocalypse Now. And so the deeper you're going into the jungle, there in Heart of Darkness, there's three levels. But the deeper you go, the worse it gets. And, this is kind of like hitting that third circle of the jungle and being like, oh my God, like, can it get any worse? Um, you know, I mean, it kind of does with that suicide bomb was also awful. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's our last big moment in the film when he fails. For the first time, we see Jeremy Renner fail to disarm a bomb, and it directly leads to one person dying. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
go
yeah,
ahead.
they're both so heartbreaking. So the body bomb, not only is it, a body with bombs in it, but it's a child who he has interacted with on the army base who's tried to sell him, bad DVDs for cheap.
But he only
And
thinks it is.
I mean, it looks like
The
him.
kid shows up later, and Jeremy
No,
Renner
that's a
play.
different kid.
I thought that was the same kid. He paid him no mind.
I thought it was a different kid, and I thought that was the point, that they were using these kids to try and like not seduce, but like, seduce is the wrong word, but try to create empathy with the soldiers that were there and then trick them into, doing weird shit and then killing them.
um,
I thought that was part of the gist there.
the Wikipedia synopsis says that he is approached by Beckham, who is the child, alive and well, who he ignores and walks by silently.
Okay.
But I think your perception of that is, it's still correct, is that there are just these children that are, indistinguishable and still a victim of the violence. I don't think it matters necessarily who the actual victim is, but like Jeremy Renner's a father, he's a father in the film, and he has like these people below his command, and then he sees this child, like a child that he's interacted with, and it fills him with an understandable amount of anger. um
Yeah.
and he goes on a quest to like try to find where this kid was from, to try to figure out who uh who got him, how this happened, and to take vengeance and justice, and he does not get it.
Yeah. And it's just a mess.
Yeah, he ends up like just going to somebody else's home and invading their privacy and space, and like realizing that he was like on this like vengeance quest, and he kind of realizes how like bad and wrong it is, because everybody's sort of innocent. um they he can't be the judge, juror, and executioner.
Yeah.
This isn't his wheelhouse. um
Yeah, it's grim. It gets really grim.
Yeah, that was just a part that like really develops his character a little bit more in like a way that I wasn't expecting. I didn't expect him to do any of that. Um, I really actually thought he would be kind of just like, ambivalent towards it, just like, oh yeah, this is something that happens. We got to get rid of this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was rough. That's all I got there.
So I guess now we can kind of talk about the end, the resolution, what kind of happens. So Shortly after the suicide bombing, the next day, they all of this company's they are go on leave. Um, Jeremy Renner's character, he goes back to the U.S. where he has a child and a wife. Anthony Mackie, Sergeant Sanborn, he is after the experience of watching a suicide bomber, he is just scared of the prospect of like dying and coming up against this problem again, and that he has no one or nothing that would like be affected by his death, and he wants more purpose in life. So that's kind of what he leaves with. We kind of glossed over this, but the specialist Owen Eldridge, who's the third character, he gets shot when they go on like a mission to stop insurgents after another bombing, and he blames Jeremy Renner's character for this injury as he's taken away and like brought to the field hospital. And yeah, it is kind of his fault. This relates back to the quote earlier about like, having a group of people that splits up and looks for clues. Like that's not a good way of going about any of it. There's strength in numbers and safety from with your brothers. But this comes because Jeremy Renner's character went through the his little quest and like realized, how much is just wrong.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, it totally was. I think that, in the grand scheme of things, because Renner's character is the one in charge of the group, when one of the people below you gets shot, that's your fault, you
Yes,
know?
yes. And I think that's why he was trying very hard to save Sanborn at the end of just like, dude, you got to run, you got to get away, you only have this much time left. Very much in a way to save the last of his company. He didn't necessarily care about himself because he still got caught in the blast, but he didn't get too hurt, so that didn't really matter. Um, Jeremy Renner goes home and is bored. His wife has him doing chores. He, hears stories of the war, and he decides that he's going to go back into the bomb squad for another year. Um, he admits as much to his child that like that's the only thing that like is interesting or gives him thrills in life is this I guess thought of instant death or explosion or interest in the horrors that are going on over there. It's a very weird thing to end on.
Yeah, like his returning to Iraq in that like final scene of like it says like days left in, I think he's in F company then. It
Yeah,
says 365 and I'm just like, holy shit. Like to make that decision, like woof. That's just not a, I mean, and it shows his thrill-seeking behavior. And I mean, frankly, suicidal behavior.
yes,
To throw yourself back in that. I mean, we watch a lot of race cars and auto racing, and every time they get in those cars, there's a chance and they're risking their lives. And this is a very similar, situation where, you go back, you're risking your life. It's suicidal. Yeah. Yeah, it's rough. And to make that decision and to think that, there's only and I think that's the rub too, is that he's not going back, because he wants to defuse the bombs and he wants to figure it out and he wants to, solve the crime or like blah blah blah. He's doing it for the thrill of it.
yeah, which is a special kind of madness.
It is. It's not good. The takeaway is not good.
Yeah. For as many things that draw people into serving in any armed conflict, there are many people there who are drawn in for the wrong reasons. And perhaps that's what kind of got this film so much acclaim because it showed people who were drawn in by the wrong reasons, people who were drawn in for the right reasons, and people who were, expelled out because of the bad decisions of others. Um,
Hmm.
it really takes a look at just about every outcome you can have over there. and it's scary and bleak and a little too real in many ways. In the same way that I think Saving Private Ryan was really real in its depiction of violence, this did a great job depicting the psychological states and the motivations behind a variety of different people that were serving in the Iraq War.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's part of what we learned, but what else did we learn, Cait?
We learned American modern warfare sucks. Like, this is just not good.
Yes. When you're deployed in a foreign country that's 100 degrees every day for 90 days to 15 months, in a place where you don't know the language, the customs, or much else, you're going to be doing some insane shit. Um, and now, with all of our drones, radio controlled equipment, little robots, uh, spy satellites, tanks, Humvees, all sorts of different guns and explosives and other things. War is getting very insane.
Yeah, it's a lot different than what it was, so this would have been filmed like 15 years ago now. So,
Yeah.
yeah, the war has changed a lot in these years, and there's so much more reliance on technology, on AI, on robots, on, just dumb equipment that we spent way too much money on. Um, yeah, so it has changed since this, but this movie does capture, people having to do crazy shit. And it also captures so many of the issues with the war in Iraq and us being there. Like being in a country where with full of soldiers where there's just no attempt at, learning any of the local language.
None.
Like and I mean, maybe this is just for the film, but they don't even say hello or stop or turn around or put your hands on your head. They don't know those phrases in um in the local language, which I would hope that a cop would know those in Spanish if they were in a Spanish speaking area,
Oh
but
yeah.
cops are shit too, way
Yeah.
way way more shit. But yeah, like but I mean, these people don't do that, and or at least that's the way they're depicted. And I think that's one of the big issues with this is that, you're doing war in a town that doesn't want you there, that's full of people that would like you to leave and are willing to explode you if necessary. It's totally different from, warfare of the last, millennia and World War II, or I mean, I guess it's like they did this kind of shit in Vietnam too, but I don't know.
Yeah. In terms of our conflicts, Vietnam and Korea would probably be the closest to what's going on here. Fought for similar, I won't say reasons, but fought for the same kind of ideological pursuits rather than like the crushing of ultimate tyranny, like we saw last week with Saving Private Ryan. Um,
Right. Well, and I think that on the local level, it's a very different mentality. Like, the people in France, when they're in France in Saving Private Ryan, are upset that their houses are getting destroyed, but they're not going to take a side necessarily during the actual armed conflict that's happening in their city.
right.
Like they just want to leave. Whereas this is, people trying to live out their lives in their city and watching all of this unfold.
Yeah, yeah, there are so many just civilian victims here.
Yeah.
The city became a war ground that they weren't no neither side was welcomed in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sorry, this is very close to, a Star Wars where we're on the side of the Empire, I guess. And yeesh.
Yeah,
But
I,
the Empire is, disarming bombs, so I don't know. It's
yeah,
rough.
yeah.
There's a lot of there's a lot of good and bad and gray here, and I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't really have a much more nuanced opinion of the Iraq War other than all war is bad. We shouldn't have done this one.
Yeah, this one definitely bad. Definitely bad. Shouldn't have done it.
No.
No.
Uh, like I remember being this being one that was, talked about a lot when I was growing up, and like the challenge of just like realizing that there are so many civilians that are just caught in the middle of it being like one of the things that even from a young age I was like, yeah, no, this is all bad. Like, this is just a bad time. And we see an excellent parallel to that now of a lot of civilians being caught in a mindless conflict.
Yeah, I mean that's true. And I mean, I think that in general, in warfare in the past, civilians have been casualties, whether it's, through sieges and, just like the peasants being killed because they want to take their, their grain and their stuff, or enslaved.
Yeah.
That was a common thing that happened in the past. But in these conflicts, it's extra hard because we see them, trying to live their days in a, copacetic environment with the occupiers and the insurgents, and being caught in that crossfire of a very, underground rebel movement situation. And it's just unpleasant. There's nothing good here. And so this movie, not my favorite. I thought that the pacing was not great. I wished that that had been better. I mean, describing it as a horror movie helps, but like,
Yeah.
I also like, after that body scene, like I had trouble watching it and paying attention, and just like not just like staring off into space going, Jesus Christ, Like it's just it's a hard movie to watch. Does that make it a good movie? It might, but I don't know.
I don't know. I have some mixed feelings here. I would say that part, his little quest, I feel like could have been cut, could have been used to make more statements. I don't know. I think if you're really interested in the topic, this is probably one of the few movies that like you could see about it, and probably one of the few you've already had. Um, if this being that like this is probably the most recent war movie we're going to talk about, or at least the one about the most recent conflict. I feel like it has its place in our war on Christmas of being, very much of its time and emblematic of a lot of what was going on in America. And I feel like its praises and what it had to say were a lot about what people were saying at the time, not necessarily what we're saying now, looking back on the conflict over the past 20 years.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that a lot of that comes from, exposure and like seeing how the conflicts progressed, and seeing how, unhelpful anything we did actually was.
Yeah.
And I mean, all of those things have probably affected this movie negatively as time has gone on.
Yeah, I would say so. If we saw and talked about this movie in 2008, 2009, we'd probably have much different things to say about it. But also our media literacy would probably be a lot worse.
Yeah. Well, and also our understanding of how life was over there, and
Yeah.
how, you know, how these kinds of wars in the Middle East, and also like the Middle Eastern mentality, and, the way of life. It's just totally different from Western life. And, that's one of the reasons why 9/11 happened. That's one of the reasons why Lawrence of Arabia happened. That's one of the
Hmm.
reasons why Dune happened.
Yeah.
So, like this is something that people have had a difficult time coming to grips with for a very long time. Okay, well, comment down below what you thought, how wrong we are. Um,
Yeah, roast us in the comments. That'll boost engagement, I think. I think
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
net good.
definitely. Yeah. I'm sure, we had some incorrect facts there or something, but we are definitely not experts on this subject. Uh, and I hope that we were able to bring some of our own perspectives as being a millennial and Gen Z, looking back on the Iraqi war. So, next week, I'm not sure what movie we're going to be watching for War on Christmas, but we are getting excited for Napoleon,
Yes.
um, and looking forward to watching some good war movies that are not so recent. Maybe we'll do Vietnam next because that's nice and cheery and pleasant.
That's the worst one.
Or, we could watch a nice Revolutionary War movie and think about the Constitution too much.
Yeah, well, let's do that. Well,
Okie dokes.
thanks everyone for your continued support.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.